Leadership, it's an incredible honor, but leading can be difficult. Leading in the world, leading at home, there certainly are a lot of challenges that come with leading. Even Jesus, the ultimate example of a leader, he ran into challenges, and one of the things he was willing to do was risking the love of the people he was called to lead. But he continued leading through that difficulty. As men, we're called to be leaders in our homes. But what does that mean? What does that look like? Too often people misuse that idea of leadership. So what's the correct way, the biblical way of leading in the home? How do we become effective Christian leaders? My guest today has great thoughts and insight on this idea. Mark Foster is a husband, a father, and a pastor in the state of Maine. And we have a great conversation about Christian leadership. So let's get started. So, hey, Mark, looking forward to talking with you today. Appreciate you being here and spending some time with us.
Yeah, Warren, I appreciated the invitation, and I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk leadership. And one of the things I want to start just at a high level, one of the things in Christian conversations, whenever we start talking leadership, the old phrase servant leader comes out, servant leadership. And sometimes it's a cliche. Sometimes it gets way overused. Sometimes it gets confused. People don't really know what it means. So we'll start almost at a definition from your viewpoint. When somebody talks about servant leadership, what does that mean?
I honestly have no idea what it means. I've tried and tried and tried. I think it depends upon the person you're talking to. If you go and look at TED Talks, you'll find at least a dozen TED Talks with the title servant leadership in them, and they all say something different. And it also depends in the Christian community, depending upon the denomination or circumstance. I like to say, to me, servant leadership more often than not ends up just being non-leader leadership. It's just, almost a way of pushing back on the idea that leadership might actually be a gift from God. So I haven't been able to find a real clear definition.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So when you say that non-leader leadership, dig into that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, so a lot of times, especially in the circles that of leaders that I run in, pastors, because I'm a pastor, I've been a pastor for 21 years. And in the pastoral community, as we've seen a pushback within the church of any kind of leadership that looks like leadership, and it's the idea that anything that I do that might actually look like I'm in charge or think I'm in charge or making a call or giving a clear direction is immediately pushed back against. And pastors are supposed to be ministers. Ministers are supposed to be servants. Servants aren't in charge of anything. And so I'm not in charge here. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm obviously not in charge because I'm a servant leader. And so that's what I mean by non-leader leadership. It's the anything other than actual leadership is what we're trying to accomplish. It feels like to me most times.
Gotcha. So it's sort of like, I don't want to put the spotlight on me. I don't want to take charge. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
I'm afraid I'm afraid that someone's going to say, you think you're in charge. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm a servant leader. I'm not in charge. I'm a servant leader. And again, Nobody really knows what that is. It's more just like, well, I like to say this. Most of the times people define servant leadership by a negative. So as soon as you talk about leadership or authority in the context of leadership, you'll get the knee-jerk reaction and say, well, it doesn't mean they're a dictator. Nope, it doesn't mean that. That's right. True. We can all agree that dictators are bad leaders, but it does mean something. And so, so a lot of it's just that pushback, that those negative definitions rather than actually defining what is this even.
Right. Yeah, and those negative definitions I'm sure we'll get into that, some of that as we get talking here. The idea of not being in charge is an interesting one because the Bible is filled beginning to end with people in charge and taking care of things. The one that's jumping into my mind right now is the wall in Jerusalem spent a long time not getting rebuilt until somebody took charge of leading the process of rebuilding the wall, and then it was rebuilt. It until there was a leader there doing that work, it didn't happen. So something else you mentioned there just in the moment was leadership is a gift. a gift from God. A lot of people I don't think would view it that way. So what do you mean by that when you say leadership is a gift from God?
Well, when you look both from Old Testament right on through New Testament, whether because that's my context, is the Christian community and church leadership and the leadership of the home, but it extends into businesses as well. But let's using that as a framework. You find out that over and over, wherever there's a clear lack of definite leadership, things tend towards chaos and to decay. That's one of the laws built into the universe, it seems, is that things tend to disorder and to chaos. And it takes actual intent and action to harness those forces for a positive outcome. And so God placed leaders in the home. He placed leaders over nations. He placed leaders over small communities because their job was to harness that potential and to get people from point A to point B, or to keep them on a good path and heading in a path of blessing and direction. So rather, it was corrupted, and leadership gets corrupted into lordship or the dictator model or whatever. But the leader themselves is a gift that God has given to keep things on track, to superintend, and to care for the needs of those under their protection. I tell the men in our church all the time, leadership is about responsibility. It's not about authority. You have authority, but it's so that you can fulfill your responsibility, and your responsibility is to care for those under you. That's why it's a gift, I think.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people talk about the servant leadership, I think that's what they're getting to is a little bit of what you just referred to, is that I have a responsibility to care for, to serve those. And I like that you mentioned leading at home, because I know when I've talked with guys before, the subject of leadership will come up, and quite often I'm a line worker, in a plant, or I don't lead a coach. I don't coach, I'm not leading a team. So where am I a leader? And from my view, and you can agree or disagree or expand on this, but from my view as men, my primary place of leadership is home first. It's not at the workplace. It's not on a ball field somewhere, not in a stadium. It's at home. So you mentioned it, as being a pastor, what kind of conversations have you had then with men about leading at home as our responsibility to lead those in, under the same roof?
I've had a lot of conversations with guys and men about it, because when I was growing up, starting when I was a teenager, is when I became aware of a lot of this language of servant leaders, or it started, servant-hearted leader, and then it just gets shortened to servant leader. And again, looking for a definition, what you hear most often is, if you men want to lead your wife, what you got to do is, you got to wash dishes, right? You got to go home and wash dishes. You gotta, you work all day and you come home and you see she's exhausted. You should just say, honey, go chill out in the bedroom, and I got it from here. I'll take, so you're going to take over the role of the homemaker as soon as you get home. That's leadership. Leadership for your wife is taking all of her responsibilities away from her so that she's just rested and, recognizing that she's had a tough day. And so that was what was presented as the model for male leadership in the home. Again, because we certainly can't have husbands who are in charge of their homes or who are perceived as authority figures. What we've done is then subserviate the husband to simply meeting the needs of his wife. And I tell our husbands, you should wash dishes for your wife sometimes, but that's not leadership. That's just loving her.
Right.
That's just loving your wife.
I agree.
So that's not leading her. You're not leading her anywhere. If the captain of a ship goes down to the galley to wash dishes and he abdicates his place at the helm, he might be, doing a favor for the cook in the galley, but where we need him is at the helm, because this ship is going somewhere. So he shouldn't be above washing dishes. And if it's all hands on deck, let's go do that. But I tell the guys, you can do all of those things. You can make sure your wife never has to do any chores at home, anything that makes her under stress, never has to deal with a kid. You can do all of that, and you're still not leading your wife. You may be loving her, but you're not leading her. Leading is having that direction. I know where this family needs to go. I know what God wants for our family, and I am lovingly and in a Christ-like manner leading my wife. You know, the passage in Ephesians, husbands love your wives, and which also then says, you know, wives submit yourselves to your husbands. Again, that knee-jerk reaction, if you ever mention the word submission in the context of the home, well, it doesn't mean that he gets to do whatever he wants. Nope, it doesn't mean that. Well, it doesn't mean that I have to be a doormat. Nope, it doesn't mean that either, but it does mean something. And Paul goes on to explain it. He says, you know, love your wife like Christ loved the church. So he gave himself for it. But it also says in that same passage, which rarely gets brought up, as the church is subject to Christ in all things. So nobody would deny that Christ serves the church. He came to be a minister. But no one also, I don't think, would say that Christ is sitting there saying, you know, what do y'all want to do? Like, I don't want to be in charge of this relationship, church. Like, you just tell me what would make your life easier, and I'll do that because I'm here to serve you. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like, no, he's the head of the church. And in his role as head, he has a goal for the church, which is to present it to himself a glorious church without spot and wrinkle. So there's this service aspect, yes, but it's not servant leadership. It is actually just leadership. Yeah. And it's leadership that understands it's about responsibility, not authority. And so that's why I tell guys in the home, lead your home after Christ and love your wife as Christ loved the church. You know, sometimes you give, but never stop leading at any point just because someone might say, what do you think you are, in charge around here?
Yeah. So what does that look like from a practical standpoint? Okay. When, you know, for a man, because I have these conversations, you know, I do events with guys up in the mountains, you know, we do this, we have these similar conversations, and guys will say, okay, that sounds good, but what does that actually mean? Like, it's Monday, what am I doing? I want to wash the dishes to help out. I want to wash the dishes to be loving and kind. I get what you're saying, Mark. So practically then, what is me as a man leading in my home? What is that on a practical basis? What am I doing that is actually leading my family?
I think part of it is taking the oversight of your home, in that you are recognizing your position under Christ as the head of your home, to safeguard it, to superintend it, and to direct it in a path that is in obedience to Christ. So your first and primary role is to govern the home in such a way that you're protecting it from those negative outside influences. You're taking I think the primary role in the rearing of the children in the way of God. That's both Old and New Testament. Like, you take the role of instructing and encouraging, disciplining when necessary, the children when they've gotten out of line with the principles that you've established for the home, including then also with your wife, that sometimes you might have to have difficult conversations when you come in and things are just in chaos. A good leader brings order out of chaos. So you're stepping in, which means you can't be interjecting chaos every time you turn around. You need to be the one helping to bring order out of chaos. And it means holding a firm line so that whether it's your children or if it's your wife having a bad day or just having a difference of opinion, wanting to throw a shoe or wanting to take things in a different direction, a good, loving leader stands firm and says, this is the direction that our house, it's Joshua saying, as for me and my house, I'm assuming he made that decision and said, I'm leading my family this way. This is the direction that we're going. This is what it means to be a part of this family. And I mean, we could drill down into specifics. I'll give you one example from my own marriage, which was, you know, years ago when we were first married. My wife and I have been married for 23 years. And my job there was some demands on my job, and there were some things about my job that she didn't particularly like. And we had a conversation one evening where I had a responsibility as part of my job to be at a meeting at 7:00 this evening. Like, there was no way to get out of it. Sometimes those things happen. I needed to be there. And she really pushed back against me. Like, she wasn't happy. She was giving me the cold shoulder, you know, you're gone again, whatever else. And every husband hates to be in that position. And I looked at my wife, because I was taught by men in my life to do this. I looked at my wife and I said, babe, I love you. Like, I would do anything in my power to make your life easier. But you're asking me to do something right now that I can't, because I also have responsibilities to my job. I also have responsibilities to the church. If it is within my power, I would give you anything, but this I can't give you. I'm going to go to this meeting because this is my job. And when I tell people that story, they're like, oh, I bet she didn't talk to you for like 2 weeks. Actually, the opposite happened. She was a little bit miffed for a little bit, but by the time I got home from the meeting, she was fine. And I think that's because I acknowledged, I love you. I'm here to help you. I'm here to do anything I can for you. But there are some things that I can't because I'm a leader. I have decisions that I need to make. And that means sometimes you not even getting what you want in this moment. So I don't know if that's a helpful illustration or one that you'll kind of cut out of the interview.
No, I won't cut out. Nope, I don't do that. I don't edit stuff out. Yeah, but I want to go back to something you mentioned there on, I wrote down talking about the role of instructing. This is something I talk about quite a bit. We in at least here in America, I can only speak for the United States. We have given over the teaching, if you will, to church.
Yeah.
And you're a pastor, so I hope you hear where I'm going with this.
Absolutely.
We've given that over, and we've said, okay, church, you get my kids for an hour and a half on Sunday, and that's it. Like I'm gonna hope that 1 hour to an hour and a half can counteract the whole rest of every day. And I tell guys all the time that church is to help you. It doesn't replace you. And so in order for a man to instruct, that means he has to know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times guys pull back a little bit on that role of instruction because they say, well, I don't know. They'll pick up their Bible and say, well, I haven't, read this cover to cover, or I don't really know what the point of Second Chronicles is.
Right.
How am I supposed to be the teacher at home? How am I supposed to be the instruction at home? I think that is paramount. But what do you say to that guy? Says, okay, yeah, but I have no idea how do I instruct at home? I'm not a pastor. I don't know this stuff. What's he supposed to do?
I think I would tell those guys, like, give yourself a break. You totally know how to instruct your children. One, do it the way Solomon did with his son when he wrote the book of Proverbs. He's like just giving him life lessons. With my kids, we look for opportunities, and this is what I teach the men in our church. We look for opportunities at any given moment. I don't care if we're watching a movie together and I see some moral or virtue presented on the screen. We're going to have a conversation about that at the earliest opportunity. Or if my daughter's having a bad day at school and we're talking about it on the way home, I'm going to look for a simple homespun way to teach her a godly lesson about, well, here's what God's word says about that. Here's the way that I think it's a good to handle this situation. And you should know the Bible. I mean, I don't want to take you, if you're a Christian, I don't want to relieve you of the responsibility of knowing the scriptures. You definitely should know the scriptures to bring them to bear on these situations. But trust your instincts as well, because God's placed you in that position to guide the children, or to guide the young people, to guide your home with just everyday opportunities. You don't have to have, I don't know if you do, Warren, but you don't have to have an hour-long devotional time with your family every single night. If you want to do that and you can find time to do that, I mean, more power to you. But I don't think you need to. And I think in the Old Testament, it was fathers, talk to your children about these things when you go to bed at night, when you get up in the morning, while you're walking by the way, while you're having dinner time. This is just this relational conversation, this relational leadership. But also, you teach your kids every day by including them in your life. One of the things that I think dads have gotten really pressured in is it's flopped from when I was a kid, where now dads are said, you're not a good dad if you don't go to all your kids' ball games, if you don't go to all their activities. And so dads are now at the mercy of the kids, all the kids' activities. And it used to be like, for a kid to spend time with dad, it meant you go to, as much as possible, you go to work with dad. You go change the oil of the vehicle with dad. You go mow the grass. Let dad show you how to do that. So you're spending time they're spending time with you, rather the reverse, where you're chasing them. So maybe look for ways to interject a little bit of that into your into your leadership style as a dad is to say to your kid, hey, why don't you come with me? I'm going to go do this thing for work, or talk to them about something that happened at work and how you handled it, and bring them into your life rather than you constantly chasing them around in theirs. And in doing that, you'll start leading without increasing any of your biblical knowledge while you're getting some momentum in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. The idea of them joining you, so to speak, instead of you joining them. And
Absolutely.
obviously there's nothing wrong. You're not saying
Nope.
there's anything wrong. So, I'm sure guys who are listening will hear that, but it's a great way to think about it, is how can your kids come along with you and learn from you and be taught from you. Yeah, I like that a lot. I also encourage the guys to, when you are reading the Bible, make sure your kids see it.
Yeah.
So it's not just, I think dad reads the Bible, but I don't know because he's in his room and the door's closed or whatever. Let them see that. When
Yep.
you have your meals together, and hopefully you have as many together as you can, lead the family in prayer. Like
Yep.
when we think of leading, it doesn't have to be big and complicated. These are the smaller practical things. And I agree. It's unlikely for the average family, we'll just put it that way, that they're going to have, you know, 6 to 7 p.m. every day is
Right.
family Bible and devotional time.
Yep.
But if they see dad 4 or 5 times a week, if they see him reading his Bible with, the TV's off, the phone is put away, and just focused on the Bible, even though dad's not teaching what he's reading, demonstrating that is a form of leadership. The kids learn that's something that they should do.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what at our house, we have a standing dinner at Sunday afternoon lunch is like almost non-negotiable, because our schedules are busy too. But the majority of the conversation that happens at that Sunday afternoon lunch centers around some biblical topic, whether it was the sermon I just preached and my kids get a chance to pick it apart or to push back against something that dad said, and we can talk about that. Or if they don't have any questions about that, then we'll pick another topic, and we're just going to talk about God and the Bible and life principles together while we eat our meal, and giving them a chance to, because part of leadership is helping your kids learn how to think, right? And
Yeah.
learn how you formulate and how you arrive at conclusions, to see what happens when they bring up a really good argument and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you know what? I don't think I've thought this through enough. I'll get back to you on that. To see,
Yeah.
like, even dad is learning as well. Dad doesn't even have all the answers.
Yeah.
So I agree. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Teaching them how to think is so critical, not what to think, but how to think. And there are certain areas where we are going to lead on what to think. So I'm
Yes.
not meaning everything is open. I'm not meaning that,
Right.
but just the idea of how to think. How do I come up with questions? How do I do this critical thinking thing? I wrote this down because I thought it was so interesting. Your kids pushing back on sermon. What's an example of that you might remember? What, when your kids did give you just a little bit of pushback? What was
Oh,
something
it
that
happens.
they
I
heard?
mean, it happens pretty often. Usually whenever we discuss issues of morality in the general sense, or the problem of evil, that's when they're most likely to push back. When there's a parent, when I make a statement that they think sounds a little bit too much like a Christian cop out, like, I know this doesn't make sense, but just trust God, everything will turn out in the end. That's not good enough for them. But there's real pain, Dad. And, well, what about this situation? And so we just got done talking about doing a series on hope when we talked about those kinds of things. And so, my son might say, I'll say, hey, what did you think about the sermon today at church? He'd be like, yeah, but you said this, and I was thinking, I don't know if I really agree with that. Like, cool, let's talk about that. Tell me where I missed it. Tell me where it didn't connect. And so they have a chance to push back against it. But I always challenge them, if you're going to push back, can you give me something biblically that that supports your pushback? And if not, that doesn't make it illegitimate, but let's see if we can think of something where there's a biblical precedent for that.
That's great. Yeah.
So yeah, I've encouraged them to do that even my wife has even picked up on it, which wasn't our background. Like, you never question the preacher, but in our house,
Yeah.
I am the preacher and they all question me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
which is cool.
It is cool. How old are your kids? I'm curious.
I have a son that's about to turn 21. He lives in another state, works his own job now. And I have a 17, 15, and 12-year-old.
Okay. And do they all sit in, your son, you mentioned different states. So the kids
Yep.
who are with you, do they all sit in each sermon?
Yes. Yes. Yep. They've had to listen to dad, you know, for year after year. Cause I've been a pastor as long as they've known me. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, they do. And they listen, but I think the reason that they listen is because they know they're going to get a chance to engage and, discuss it.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
yeah,
Very cool. So one of the things I enjoy about talking with you is that we are looking at this idea from
yeah,
leadership from a Christian worldview, from a
yep.
Christian perspective. All the folks that's who this show is for. It's for Christian men, and so we're able to discuss these things and think about these things. So a question that I get to ask you that, if we were talking in the secular world about leadership, we probably wouldn't. What are some of the leadership lessons we get to learn from Jesus? What does he teach us? What has he demonstrated? What do we learn about leadership from him?
I think one of the lessons that I'm still trying to learn from Jesus is his willingness to have uncomfortable conversations with people that he's leading and risking losing their love. I think that is for a leader who actually does love people, and they're not just a dictator at heart. There's always a risk of losing love whenever you enter into a difficult conversation, which is why a lot of Christian leaders don't move towards difficult conversations. And I see Jesus doing that sometimes in the context of a dinner, where he wants to talk to Simon the Pharisee and says, "Hey, I got a question for you," and kind of confronts him a little bit sternly, but with some compassion, to someone like Peter, who he has to do that with often. Or James and John, when they want to be, when they sent their mom to ask him if they could be at his right hand and left hand when he came into his kingdom. He's not afraid to have these conversations when someone in his troop is missing it somewhere. And then he comes alongside of them and gives them the opportunity to pick up and let's keep on going. So he doesn't cast him out of the gang, but he really does risk losing their love, and he seems fearless in that. And so that's a lesson. That's one major lesson that I'm still trying to learn from Jesus.
Yeah. 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 And that's a great one. And as you were mentioning earlier, the leader just isn't dictator.
Correct.
He would give everyone the out. If they wanted to walk, they could walk.
Yep.
The rich young ruler came to him, could have stayed, but didn't like what Jesus had to say, and so left.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great way to word that. I wrote that one down because I like that phrase, risk losing their love. Yeah, that's really, really good. How about scripture overall? And instead of just specific to Jesus, I feel like there are leadership lessons all throughout the Bible. So what about scripture overall? What are some leadership lessons you've taken, Old or New Testament, from different various stories out of the Bible over the years?
I think a couple come to mind. One would be that the best of leaders recognize that they themselves are under authority. So God took, the leaders of Israel to task in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, but specifically in Isaiah, because they had the authority, but they were destroying the flock. They weren't leading them well. Right there in the first couple chapters of Isaiah, "Oh my people, they that lead thee cause thee to err." They're the ones that are messing things up, and so he took them to task for that, because leaders forget sometimes that we also have someone we answer to, and that's Old and New Testament a principle. So I think that's a leadership principle. Also, a leadership I'm being unclear. What I'm trying to say is the need for clarity in leadership. When you step out to make a decision and to lead, it needs to be because you've spent time hearing from God, and you're pretty sure as you can be, this is the direction that God is calling us to go. If you're going to ask people to follow you, you owe them that. You owe them. I think you owe them the need to be clear. That, whether that's Nehemiah, you mentioned Nehemiah earlier, Nehemiah said, then I told, after he went out at night and surveyed the walls, he said, then I told them of God's hand on me and how he had directed me to do this. And Moses saying, here's what God has said. And so this is the direction we're going. And he was always willing to be like, if you think I'm wrong, let's put it to the test. But I'm the one that God has called to do this. So clarity in leadership, but also confidence in leadership. Don't hesitate. If you believe that you're the one that God has placed there as the leader, be confident and bold in that. Like whether that's church leadership or leadership of men in the home, you are the leader. God has placed you in that position. And you don't abdicate that leadership because of your own insecurities or because someone throws a barb at you. Like, God placed you there. In the church, it's the Holy Ghost that makes you an overseer. Like, you're there, and be confident in that. I see way too many leaders apologizing for being a leader. But here's the problem with that. See, I think the idea of pure congregational polity, or even pure democracy, which is why in our country we're not a pure democracy. Right. I think it's a myth. There is no such thing as hive mind. A leader will always rise up. Always. In the absence of a clear leader, someone else will. I don't care if there's a mob, somebody's behind that mob pushing the buttons and making things go. And so and you see that in the Bible. Anytime that a leader was absent, a leader for good or bad always rose up from within the group. So be confident. Dad, if you don't lead your home, someone is going to.
Right. Someone will.
Yeah, someone will. It's not going to be, well, I just let everybody do what they want. It doesn't work that way for long. Somebody is leading always. And God put you there to be the leader. So I got in trouble with some pastors recently in a group because they said, well, we've seen a lot of guys go in and, they destroy their churches and heavy-handed and stuff. I said, yeah, I'm not talking about any of that. But I am talking about you are the leader, whether you have a single pastor model or an elder rule model, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Even in an elder rule model, all the guys in that room are all inevitably going to look at least one person. Right. This is the Council of Jerusalem. After all the elders and the apostles talked, then James stood up and he said, okay, here's what I think we need to do. And so, again, all this discussion, but it still comes down to one. So if you're that leader, I think that's a biblical principle. Be clear in your leadership and be confident in the position that God has given you to lead.
Yeah. Yeah. The clarity and the confidence are critical, because if you were to be leading at home and you're telling even if it's something, we'll pick something silly and simple. It's, where to go for dinner. Every family has had that conversation over and over and over. And it could start, everybody's sort of in a fun mood. We're going to go out for dinner. And if it's, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? It can very easily 5 minutes later be everybody's mad at everybody and no one wants to even go out for dinner.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
If Dad would have he knows his family, says, hey, we all like this place, we're going to go. Everybody's sort of like, okay, and that's where we're going to go. Yep. It's a simple example, but yeah, you need to be clear. You need to be confident. You need to make a decision. And yeah, I like that. You talked just briefly in there as well, a little bit about you just mentioned insecurities, and I want to build off that something that I think leaders can struggle with is the, I don't know. Something I think leaders sometimes can feel. You talked about it within your family, even, kids might ask you a question. Men, perhaps, I don't know the women's market. That's not my market. Men can really struggle with that sometimes. I don't know. I don't want to seem like I'm insecure. I don't want to seem like I don't know all the answers. I don't want to seem, like that. So how would you help somebody get past well, I don't have all the answers. And why is it okay to say, I don't know? I'm the leader. Aren't I
Right.
supposed to have all the answers to everything? So how do you help somebody work through that type of insecurity and struggling with well, I don't know everything. How am I a leader when I don't know?
Yeah, I would say one, look at the actual world around you and recognize that no leader ever has all the answers. That's demonstrably true. And secondly, avoid the myth of certainty. Like, there are going to be so many times where you won't know the answer. Being a leader, nobody makes you a leader because you know all the answers. They make you a leader because you have the ability to make a decision, and you arrive at that decision through the access of information, whether that's your information or if it comes from someone else. I make lots of decisions in my home based on the advice of my wife. Right. So, because sometimes I am at a loss, like, I don't know. My oldest daughter is 15 years of age. Terrifying. It's like terrifying to have a teenage daughter. And now there's a boy that she's interested in. And I've been dreading that day from coming. And, long gone are the days where she's just my little girl sitting on my lap and all of these things. I don't always know what to do, and I don't want to blow it. So when there's a decision that needs to be made, a lot of time I'll sit with my wife at night and say, look, I don't want to blow this. I know I need to do something here, but I don't want to blow this. And I'm not sure I understand. Help me to understand what's going on in her head and how I can approach this. And then I'll take what my wife has said to me and be like, okay, all right, thank you. That helps. And then I'm going to go and make the decision. So a leader doesn't have to make the decision with his own information. He just has to make the decision with the best information available to him.
Yeah.
So surround yourself with people that you can call. This is where I think men fail, right? We're all lone rangers rather than having that group of men, whether it's your wife or whether it's another group of men that are some ahead of you, some alongside of you, that you can call and say, I've never faced this before. I don't really know what to do. And just get over the fact that saying, I don't know, somehow makes you a bad leader. It doesn't.
Yeah.
What would make you a bad leader is if you pretended to know.
Right. Yeah.
So just say, I don't know, but I can find out.
I take that view. If there's a leader who never says, I don't know, that causes me to question. Because to your point earlier, there's nobody on earth who knows the answer to everything.
No.
And so if you're with a leader who never says, you know what, I don't know, I need to go research that. I need to go look into that. I'll get back to you. If you have a leader who doesn't do that, to me, that's a pretty big red flag, actually.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to say, I don't know. And I think one of the critical parts of that, I don't know, is go find the answer and you better bring it back. Because if you're just, I don't know, and forget about it, that also isn't a good leader. You need to be able to come back to that person. And in your example, you talked about speaking with your wife and a little bit there about having other people around. To me, we have an epidemic of men in this country who don't have those friends, don't have that group, don't have people who are ahead of them, beside them, or below, so to speak.
Yep.
And so everybody is alone, wearing the mask of I have everything figured out. And it's a big, big problem.
Go ahead. I think the higher your leadership level is, the more likely you're going to need to have people around you. I mean, world leaders have advisors because you can't know everything. But as a dad, sometimes I ask my kids for advice on what to do in a given situation. Because again, I'm trying to raise future leaders. I want to know what they're thinking. And sometimes they have insights that I don't have. Being a leader doesn't mean you can't ask the people that you're leading. I don't like the term. I almost said you can't ask people under you, but I think that's part of the problem of the mindset. I'm leading you, but that doesn't mean you're under me. You might be behind me, but you're not under me. And so I know it's semantics, but words matter. And so ask the people under you or behind you or beside you. I don't care. But I tell my kids, I still have to make the final decision here, but I'm not quite sure what to do. I would love to hear what you think I should do in this situation if you were me. And sometimes it's really great advice. Other times I don't take it because the ultimate decision is mine, but all the wisdom isn't.
Yeah. You talked about with your kids raising future leaders. So how does a guy being a leader in his family, how does that inspire others, hopefully as kids, but not just as kids? How does being a leader inspire others to be leaders, we're creating more. That's the goal, is to create
Right.
more leaders. So how does you or I or somebody listening, how do we inspire other people by our leadership?
I talk to my kids all the time about times when I fail in leadership. My kids have heard me say I'm sorry probably more times than I can count over the 20 years of being a parent. If I blow it, and I'm aware of it, even if I get angry for a little while, I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, I blew that. And I don't think an apology means you can no longer be the leader. It's just part of leading. Like, you're going to make some mistakes.
Sure.
So I let them see the flaws that come along with leadership, and see how I handle that. Mistakes aren't something you have to be afraid of. Not only that, I only exercise directional authority. I do it less and less as they grow, giving them more and more opportunities to exercise their own leadership within a limited capacity. So helping them to develop character, helping them to recognize areas where they're responsible for some of these things in their life and in others. And so trying to, and then looking for as many opportunities as possible to put them in positions where they need to make a decision, and that they need to stand by the decision that they made. So giving them an opportunity to fail early on in a safe environment helps them to be less afraid of leadership as they grow.
Yeah. And that's a good one. Putting them in a position to make decisions. So many parents want to, in the guise of protecting and providing, take away all of that.
Yep.
I'll make all the decisions. I'll take care of everything. You're not going to have to worry about a thing. You're not going to have to deal with this. And that learning to fail is a critical part, because as a leader, you're going to mess up. As a human being, you're going to mess up. And so learning how to fail is huge, because otherwise, if you've never experienced that, then that's when you find the story of, the 23-year-old kid who had their first experience with failure and their life crashed,
right?
Because they don't know how to deal with it. So that's pretty cool that you're doing that. You're creating those opportunities for your kids to fail, make decisions, and live with them, and fail with that at home. That's huge. Yeah, that's really huge. I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
So, our social media world has changed everything.
Yeah.
I won't go into a long rant on social media. Not a big fan. We'll put it that way. There's the short rant. Not a big fan of social media. But one of the things that it has done is it's caused the general average world, we're putting the spotlight on ourselves. And even when you log into Facebook, it says, here are your memories. You can see what you did. Like, the whole thing is designed around you. And so from a leadership perspective, I think this is starting to cause some challenges, because leaders are doing things to put the spotlight on themselves. They're doing things in order to get accolades. They're doing things in order to get a pat on the back. And it's weird, because it doesn't necessarily mean the thing was wrong that they did.
Right.
But the reason behind it, perhaps we need to investigate a little bit. So I know this is a very vague question, but how do you see sort of media and culture impacting leadership? How is this world that we're in right now impacting people as leaders versus, 30 years ago, when this kind of environment didn't exist?
Wow. Well, I have to be honest here that this is still an area that I'm struggling to navigate. Even as a leader, I've had sections of time where, like, I'm posting every day on my church's Facebook page, or trying to give, because of the algorithms and everything else. Like, if you want to be an influencer, or if you want to have an impact, or you just want people to even see what you said, like, you got to do it every day, and you got to be always thinking of something new to say. And so it does create a bit of a narcissistic loop, where you actually, you're just trying to come up with the next thing to say, so that people know that you're a leader in this area. I'm a thought leader. I'm a influencer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the dad guy. I'm sure even you've faced that. Like
I do.
I help
I do.
men. Well, there's 101 other guys out there helping men. Why are you any better? Well, let me tell you why I'm better at helping.
Right.
So it's just,
Yep.
there's a lot of pressure to navigate that, and I'm not always doing it well. I think the other area that social media is influencing negatively leaders is there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to pretend, just because that's what's expected. Like authenticity isn't as important, or it is important, but it isn't as perceived as important, I think. And or if it is authentic, it's scriptedly authentic,
Right. Right.
so again, everything's just a live, live TV, or what they call that, real, reality TV, which is just,
Right.
scripted itself. And whether
Yeah.
that we actually stopped live streaming at our church because I told our congregation, we don't have a big congregation, and once you took my mom and my sister-in-law and my aunt out of our viewing population, I mean, there wasn't hardly anybody watching anyway. But I was like, I'm not going to live stream anymore because I'm constantly worried about who's watching, how it's being perceived,
Right. Right.
what it looks like. And so we just stopped. And I wanted to be able to be present with the people that we're in. And the third area that I think there's the negativity is that it gives you the feeling like you're impacting maybe more people than you are without actually being in any individual person's life. If you've got 1,000 followers or 20,000 followers online, that can feel like, man, I'm really making a massive impact.
Yeah.
But the guy next door
Right.
to you hasn't had you knock on his door once to have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
I
don't know
think
if that
guys
answers.
struggle. I think guys struggle with that because sometimes we feel like, I need to make this massive impact for the kingdom.
Yeah,
I have to do this. And if I don't have 20,000 people liking every one of my posts, I'm not doing enough.
right.
But the reality is this is God's kingdom, not mine, not
Yeah,
yours. And if what God put me here is to have, to your point, knock on the neighbor's door, if maybe God put me on earth to have one conversation with one guy one time, like our egos really struggle with that
oh
because we're
yeah,
thinking, yeah, but what about the 100,000 people I need to impact? I want to change the world. I want to do all these things. That's the kind of leader I want to be. I want to
right,
build a multinational corporation for the kingdom. And
right.
and so we start to tell ourselves those things. And so I really appreciate that you brought that point up. It wasn't one I was thinking of as we were talking here, but as a leader, your leadership in your family, that if God put you here to do that, that's perfect. You don't
Absolutely.
need to go create a global organization that's impacting 100 million people. Just that one guy, that might be enough. Your
Yeah,
family, that's enough. Your sons, your daughters, your wife, yourself, that's enough. So
yeah,
yeah, I really do appreciate that we ended up at that particular point because that's such a huge one. That's so big.
cool.
Yep. So as we're getting close to wrapping up here, um, one of the things I want to ask is, uh, what kind of what kind of questions should I be asking myself? So if I'm a leader and I have a family, so therefore I am, so the guys who are listening, who are leaders, what are the important questions I should be asking of myself? What do I, that introspective side? What do I need to be looking at there? What do I need to be asking myself as a leader?
Maybe an important question to be asking ourselves is, am I honestly seeking the benefit and blessing of those under my care? Or am I trying to lead in such a way that my life is made easier or my kingdom is built, as a result of it? Do I genuinely have their best interest at heart in these decisions? And if you want to call that servant leadership, then that's fine by me. but I don't think it is. I think when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, I think that's what he was saying. Like, this was all about you guys from the get-go. Like, this is why I came. Everything I'm doing. But he didn't walk around, putting everything to a vote. But he said, make no mistake, everything I didn't come to serve myself here. And so is my leadership self-serving would be, I guess, the question I would ask.
Yeah. And that's a great one. Is my leadership self-serving? Because so often I think it ends up that way. We may not really mean for it to, but it can end up that way so easily that we are leading everybody to the place that I want to go. And you mentioned earlier the point of clarity, the point of confidence. Yes, that's true. But if the whole purpose of you leading is that your family and anyone else in your sphere is doing what you want to get done, that can be pretty dangerous. And we would have to make sure that you talked earlier that about Moses. We'll check it, so to speak, validate it, so to speak.
Right.
If I'm saying these are the things I want to do, especially if I'm saying these are the things I want to do because they're biblical, this is what Scripture says, this is what God has told me to do, we should be able to validate that against Scripture. We should be able to test that against Scripture and find out if that is indeed true. So that's a great way to look at it. What's one last point you'd love to leave guys with? It could be reinforcing or talking about something we've mentioned, or perhaps something that we missed along the way when it comes to this idea of leaders, Christian leadership, and so on. What's a last point or two that you'd like to leave everybody with today?
I think I'd want to just leave with the idea that I think the best thing that a Christian man can do, is to, especially for those under his authority, is to lead them with firmness, with love, and with dedication. All of those things, lead them to Christ with the goal of bringing them into the blessing and the benefit that Christ has for them. I would want guys to have that as their goal. Like, I want to make sure that at the end of my life, I have led my family to the promised land to the best of my ability. And I get to do that because God's put me in a position to lead, but he hasn't put me in a position to determine the destination. He already set that. So I just get to lead my family there. And that's my goal with my family. That's my goal with my church, is I want to get where God wants us to be. And
it's such an honor and a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we could remember that as leaders as well, that this really is an honor. This really is a privilege that we're able to do that. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
100%.
So Mark, if guys want to find out a little bit more about you, where would they go? Where do you want guys to go?
So I'm in between, websites and different things right now. So I don't have a fancy website or they certainly welcome to connect with me on Facebook if they want to do that. Mark Foster. Sure. You'll see me there, but I don't mind giving you my cell phone number. And if a guy just wants to reach out by cell phone, it's one of the things I love to do, is to talk with guys, whether they're pastors or husbands, dads, to say, hey, how can I encourage you? So if you're okay with that, I'll just give you my cell phone number right here, and
I'll add your Facebook to the show notes, so guys can connect with you on Facebook. So we'll give you. I have a background in security, so I still have a little bit of a privacy thing in my
No worries. Yeah, no worries.
So we'll do that. I'll link your Facebook account so people can connect with you there, and then you can message them, and if that leads to a voice conversation, that would be fantastic. That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Cool.
So, hey, Mark, really appreciate your time today talking through this. It's an important topic, and your thoughts were really well received. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate it.
Yep. Have a great day.